have is the lack of information concerning where the middle mile will be able to contact with us, because as we build out, we don't want to have to rebuild out again to these locations. So there's been a real lack of response from the different agencies that we've contacted to find out where these points of contact will be. The other piece of it is that we also have to build along some of these same right-of-ways in order to connect communities, and we'd rather be building it once instead of digging it twice, that type of thing. The other piece of information too is who would we contact to be able to find out what our costs will be so that we can plan appropriately for the future. And other than that, that's it for right now.
Thank you. We will be reaching out to you and make sure you have contact information.
Hello, next speaker. Your 2 minutes will begin now.
Hi, my name is Patrick Messick, here representing the City of Oakland. Absent this council's urgent intervention, CDT plans to push forward with the plan to use a first-come, first-serve approach that will yet again prioritize California's wealthiest, most connected communities for the remaining $2 billion of secured funding for this once-in-a-generation middle-mile infrastructure investment. Let us be clear. To do nothing constitutes injustice by omission. The broadband map being used to justify overbuilding in demonstrably serve wealthy communities is not just flawed, it's discriminatory, and I'll show you now. Similar to every place across California, the digital divide is not evenly distributed. In Alameda County, it's focused in 3 areas: West Oakland, Fruitvale, and Deep East Oakland, where communities have as much as 30% of residents without home internet access. So when you look at the state broadband map, you would expect to see dense clusters of unserved in locations where almost half of the housing stock was built around 1940, where the CPUC's own network exam shows that incumbent ISPs divest in these communities, where income is incredibly low. Yet, looking at this map, there is not a single cluster of more than 3 unserved locations adjacent to one another. This data is deeply flawed. In just 3 weeks of running speed tests on student laptops, we've identified thousands of more addresses that are unserved in this part of Alameda County. But the state is using this data, so it's no surprise that they entirely eliminated SR 185 and have moved I-580 to a time when we do not have secured funding for it yet. So at least everyone's in the same boat, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. You go to the broadband map for the 2 wealthiest communities in Alameda County, Pleasanton and Livermore, and you see a preponderance of dense clusters that are demonstrably served.
Thank you, Mr. Messick.
I'm just going to end here. The impact of this decision in Alameda County is that the vast majority of broadband funding is going to the wealthiest, most connected areas in our county. We have to prioritize the communities that this legislation was intended to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Next speaker. Great, thank you, Georgia Savage, representing Oakland Undivided. Our coalition was very encouraged by the governor's promise to pursue additional funding to complete the second phase of the network, and we urge the governor to issue a clear statement outlining this plan. However, realistically, California has many competing budget priorities, and completing the network could require upwards of $2 billion additional dollars. If equity is a driving principle, we must ask ourselves which communities should receive the secured remaining funding. The solution is clear. First, we must uncouple funding from this demonstrably inaccurate map. Prioritizing investment in communities that lack access to internet is the right idea, but the state's broadband map is demonstrably inaccurate in determining internet need and therefore cannot be trusted for such an important task. The state's process takes an already flawed national map and makes it worse by fabricating need in our country's wealthiest communities. According to the CalMatter article published yesterday, the state has already spent $1.8 of the $3.8 billion on segments including Beverly Hills. It is vital that we are intentional with the remaining $2 billion. Being intentional requires prioritizing the most disconnected, highest poverty communities first. Low-income communities get the oldest, most poorly maintained infrastructure, if any at all. They pay higher rates for slower, less reliable speeds, and many can't get broadband internet. They're bypassed for investment by private companies and have been for decades. Common sense and basic decency says we must start here. These communities cannot afford to wait another year while tens of thousands lack access to this 21st century necessity. In short, the state must prioritize the communities farthest from opportunity to actualize the purpose of the legislation and these dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker from Zoom will be Ronaldo Produco. Please unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Ronaldo Brudico. I'm the founder and CEO of H2 Clipper, including our wholly owned subsidiary, which is H2C Safety Pipe. Wednesday afternoon, I spoke at the CTC meeting regarding the topic of the Clean Freight Border Initiative. And yesterday morning, my colleague spoke regarding the topic of the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative following the excellent update provided by Mr. Adams. The state of California is blessed by an abundance of opportunities to make incredible strides in advancing digital literacy, as well as in addressing climate change and advancing the energy transition. As you know, timing is critical since opportunities have a way, unless they timely are acted upon, to pass by. We are hopeful the advisory committee will seriously consider the opportunity for key portions of the trench that will be dug as part of the Middleman Broadband Initiative to be employed for installing a hydrogen pipeline along critical routes such as the I-710 and I-5 corridors. Some people refer to the I-710 freeway as cancer corridor due to the amount of diesel soot produced from the traffic as well as noxious emissions. The same is true with the Inland Empire. The state has a unique opportunity to address this health and social justice issue through zero emissions trucking as proposed by the governor, by the Port of Long Beach, and mandated by the state legislature. The committee has an opportunity to resolve this crisis. I would like to call your attention to a video called Dig Once, Benefit Twice, which lays out the possibility of putting that hydrogen pipe in the same exact trench with additional funding we can supply to make it big enough to hold a hydrogen pipeline that would then fuel truck stops that would allow the trucks to fill up as they enter and exit the Long Beach area. Articulating this in front of people at that April 13th meeting, which was held at the regional headquarters of CARB, we were able to have the key people in politics, local government, and Caltrans all focus, along with Tyson Eckerly, Angelina, and other notables, on how to get this done. The funding exists, the will exists, and we are willing to help. Just let us know how. If we could be in touch with Mr. Monroe or others, that might be the best way to advance supplemental funding. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Produco.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarado. Is there a way to take down, I'd like to see the faces of everyone. I did not realize that the clock was going to take up the entire screen. Can we maybe take that down and do it so we can see people that are actually, thank you. It just take a minute. And if we could just bring up the Zoom so that when people are speaking and promoted, we can see them.
I have video on some of these, so I can share the video. It's just audio for those who can share.
Okay, so it sounds like there's people that are only audio, but for the Zoom ones, can we at least bring up the Zoom screen?
Our next speaker is Larry O. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Larry Ortega with Fiber Up My Neighborhood in Southern California. We do and have been doing technology training throughout the state since 1994. Lots of experience in digital divide areas. My question is with regard to the middle mile and who are the decision makers that are blocking and changing the plans of funding middle mile efforts in Oakland as well as in San Gabriel Valley. What we were told is that there's partnerships and relationships that are now being built or in lieu of an actual build. I don't quite understand that, and I'm wondering, is it possible to maybe identify who these decision makers are in terms of setting up these partnerships, what the status is, and how do we follow along and perhaps facilitate and participate in this process, because the middle mile is absolutely essential, and we got to have it. We cannot not have it, and if there's relationships that are now being set up in lieu of the actual build, community and leaders in this region need to be aware of, how do we communicate with these individuals, who are they, etc.
Thank you. Our next speaker comes from FSCMC. Not hearing FSCMC.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the option to mute or unmute until just now. So I'm calling to ask, or joining to ask, how it is that the Big Sur Coast was left off the build map, and to report that my name is Michael Kaplan, by the way, for the record, now that I can see who it says is calling. So I'm joining to ask that the Big Sur Coast be added to the build map. I'm curious how it got left off the build map. Looking at the slides that were shown earlier, the slide with the green areas that showed underserved areas, the Big Sur Coast had no green areas that I could see, and yet there is essentially no broadband internet along the Big Sur Coast. The Public Utility Commission's map is wrong. It shows that, for example, that we have 26 megabits per second available from AT&T. We gave up on AT&T when they were offering us 750 kilobits per second, which was very much like dial-up and unusable. We now use Starlink internet. Our neighbors don't have internet access at the kind of speeds that broadband for all is supposed to be bringing to everywhere. I would ask that when you think of the term broadband for all, that you think broadband for all except for Big Sur, because that is, we are not even on the build map. And our congressman has written to the Public Utilities Commission about the inaccuracies of its availability for internet and cell service in our area. Our fire stations, our fire departments have no access to broadband internet. They have problems when they go on calls. Millions of visitors drive the Big Sur Coast. People have died for lack of connectivity. So how do we get the Public Utilities Commission to acknowledge that there is no effective broadband or even low-speed internet, relatively low-speed internet available for almost the entire Big Sur Coast? You show nothing on your map from Monterey down to the San Luis Obispo County line. How do we get on the map and bring broadband for all to Big Sur?
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Our next speaker will be Maddie Ribble. Please unmute.
Hello, So good morning. My name is Maddie Ribble. I represent the Children's Partnership, a statewide organization working to advance health equity and racial justice for children and families across California, especially the families of color who are disproportionately lacking access to reliable, affordable internet. We are appreciative of many of the sentiments offered at this morning's meeting. However, we have been and we continue to be deeply concerned about the lack of equity, community, and accountability in the MMBI process and the problematic outcomes that this flawed process has delivered. In recent weeks, the middle mile map has undergone multiple rounds of changes, some of them major, without notice to or consultation with affected communities. Segments in historically marginalized communities where affordable and reliable internet has remained elusive, particularly those communities where the digital divide is most dire, were pushed to the back of the line to currently unfunded phases of work. And while we appreciate the stated commitment this morning to fully fund one network, the reality is that the future funding needed to complete the entire network is far from guaranteed, and the projects in practice will proceed in phases. Since early August, multiple changes have been made to the maps with no more documentation than an updated date at the very bottom. The changes to the maps were decided without public consultation, with no explanation or updated analysis, and were published quietly with no announcement. The most recent was this morning, but it is still up to communities to scour the maps trying to figure out what the changes were. The current map with one phase does not include information about which segments are contracted and which are intended, continuing to obscure the impacting communities. Considering the unprecedented taxpayer investment in the MMBI and that it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to close the digital divide once and for all, this lack of equity, community, and accountability is unconscionable. The connectivity needs of the least connected and most disadvantaged communities must be prioritized as existing resources are allocated, and communities must be included in this process and not continue to be cut out, as we've seen in recent months. We stand together in solidarity with our partners at Oakland Undivided, CADE, Digital Equity LA, and advocates across the state in calling for you to take urgent action to fix this broken process and its problematic outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ripple. Joel Aravelis will speak next.
Yes, this is Hector Delatorre. Joel is the one who set up our system, so his name comes up. I am the Executive Director of the Gateway Cities Council of Governments and a former state assembly member representing the same community in Southeast LA County. Gateway Cities has a disproportionate amount of California's most severely impacted disadvantaged community neighborhoods by socioeconomic measures. Gateway Cities has 5% of the statewide population, but 10% of disadvantaged community census tracts. In fact, we have 23% of the statewide top 5 percentile disadvantaged community census tracts, and 36% of the top 10 percentile disadvantaged community tracts. So clearly low income, underserved by any measure. What the administration has done by reducing the overall plan of the Golden State Network by 13% in your MMBI routes translated into 62% of the routes being eliminated in funding for our section of MMBI. We went from 118 miles of MMBI routes to 45 miles of MMBI routes, from 26 cities to 8, and none of the 6 that were highlighted in the governor's press release announcement of this initiative 2 years ago. We call these 6 cities the skipped over 6. We did not highlight them, the administration did. Not to mention that Beverly Hills and Malibu remain. You can give us all kinds of dancing around loops and technology, but this is exactly why we have a digital divide in the first place. So if it was easy, it would have been done a long time ago.